All right, welcome to Going Deep. Brandon Angelo, Matt Waldman. We are getting about a month away from the NFL draft, maybe a little more than that, but getting close. And Brandon thought, let's do a listener Q&A. So we got a good bit of questions, and we're going to just get right into it. So we're going to alternate. We're going to try and answer them as quickly as we can, see how many we can get through. And I bet the over-under is 5 with us, but we're going to see if we can.
A safe under, typically.
But let's see if we can like screw up expectations here and upset
100%.
people. So I'll start. Joe from X said, what do you make of the perceived tier drop off after the 1.05, 1.04 in Scott Fish and one quarterback leagues? And would you prefer pushing picks out to later years, especially the vaulted 2027 year? Looking forward to the RSP and re-upping on the rankings. Well, thank you. What do you think?
Oh, man. I think it's really interesting because when you look at the non-Superflex, that's what he's asking essentially, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're going to go Love. I think he's in a tier of his own. And then Lemon, Tate, Tyson are kind of all in that second tier because you're assuming those guys are going to get top 15, top 20 capital. Where it gets dicey is after that, what are you projecting? If you draft before the NFL draft in particular, that's where it gets trickier because you just don't know. I'd say Omar Cooper Jr. is the next one. From a projected role standpoint, I could see teams in the late teens really vying to get a prospect like him because he's one of those guys a little tougher to find, more so his brand of football and how he carries himself and that type of deal. That's more difficult. So I would say it gets tricky around that 105 plus range when you get into it. I mean, Cooper Jr., Mendoza is not a bad one in 1 QB either. If you're, if it's obviously Dynasty, if you're looking to draft a quarterback, he's safe. Because typically in the first round, everybody says, but you're trying to hit your first round draft pick every time. But you sometimes want to take the floor, whereas a guy like Cooper Jr. might not have a super high ceiling, but he's going to have a pretty viable floor for a long time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with most of those players in terms of that they're the viable players. We may be different on the order with them. For sure, I would say in the wide receiver realm, for me, I would even argue it's Tate and Love, and like it depends on how you're trying to build your team, which one you really want to go. If you're in a position to win now and you just need a back to put you over the top, Love certainly qualifies. If you're building and you're trying to go the safe route of like who's going to offer you the most years and a strong production track record, and wide receivers tend to be a little safer, and I think Tate would be a guy that I would feel good about. And if you couldn't get him, I'd still feel great about Lemon. So, those two guys. After that, I mean, really, I would probably say pre-draft, if you're drafting before the NFL draft, I would start looking at guys who maybe offer a little bit more upside too. Like I'd look at Skylar Bell. I would consider him as somebody that I would feel pretty good with. Here's where I would probably consider Jordan Tyson, even though we've talked about the concerns, and I'm kind of there with you on that realm. And then of course, and a running back, honestly, after Jeremiah Love, it's all fit based. It's all, at best. It's all at best fit based because there's a lot of guys who, from my perspective, are they can contribute. They might even grow into starters. They could do that, but they're not projected to start right away. And they may not even projected to be a contributor right away. So it's kind of like looking at James Cook a number of years ago, and you could look at him and go, I could see how this guy could develop into something, but are the teams going to believe it? Is he going to grow into it? Are they going to give him the bulk of the touches? And I would say most people probably were going to say, nah, probably not. They're going to treat him like Eric Metcalf from way back in the day and have him be a gadget player. So there's some guys in this draft that are like that. I'm with you on Mendoza. To me, like the two receivers in Mendoza are probably like super safe, like conservative picks. But I don't know how you wouldn't want to take Jeremiah Love. After watching him, I feel like you're getting an Alvin Kamara type of prospect who,
Sure.
somewhere along those lines. That's I think that kind of answers it. Is that if you don't after that, I guess you're going to try and go for 2027, and but everyone's going to be going for it. So my suggestion to you is if you don't already have 2027 picks, you're probably not going to get them. Not in savvier leagues, I would think. So at this point, maybe you just roll with your best shots at upside with some of these guys. So all right. Next one we have is from Mike. If you don't have the 1.101 in your league's 2026 rookie draft and your team is in need of a running back, what would be your running back strategy for this year? Are there guys going to the second round or later that have a real path to fantasy relevance? Well, I think we answered that one.
Yeah, no, yeah. Go ahead if you want to expand further. This is all you.
I would just say that there are, based on fit. Like if Omarion Hampton to me is not a great back last year, but where he wound up with the Chargers is probably a decent enough fit that he's going to at least be a fantasy factor probably for another year or two at least, and see whether he grows or not. But he's going to give you maybe running back 2, running back 3 value, and he has the ceiling to be a running back 1, depending on how they use him in that system. Well, you could see how a Mike Washington Jr. might fit into something like that. Even if he's not, I don't think the combine really was anything that was that huge of a surprise. I think he is what he is. So, but guys like Mike Washington certainly might do that. Damon Claiborne is a fun player, but he's 188 pounds. And are we looking at a Clinton Portis type of player, James Cook type of player in him that can add another 10 pounds to his frame and be a really good scat back in the league, a change of pace guy? Very possible, but you got to see, again, you're going in blind with that and to that level. Guys like Nicholas Singleton, Jadarian Price. I know a lot of people love Jadarian Price and look at that, and I go, that I think he certainly has the upside. There's a bunch of guys to me that have that upside that you look at and go, yeah, they could probably become starters, but we got to see if they can prove they've gotten better at some things, not just project that they will. And I think that some of the projections for these guys are a little bit more difficult than people are probably going to put it. So honestly, if you're going, my bet would be if you're trying to get a running back in the first round and you don't get Jeremiah Love, take the best receiver available. Take the best if the top 2 receivers aren't there, Lemon and Tate, or Tate and Lemon, however you want to look at it, take Mendoza, because at least on a level where stockpile. I'm always a big believer that if draft talent at that point, you don't really want to draft talent, stockpile, and down the line you'll be better off if you end up hitting on that pick and being able to trade it because you didn't need it, or trading somebody else on your team who now you're like, say you draft Mekhi Lemon and you had Jalen Waddle and you were thinking, oh, I'm excited about where he's going in Denver and he's going to be, a strong wide receiver too, and then we find out he turns into Tutu Atwell light for some reason, and you're disappointed, but you ended up with Lemon and you were thrilled, and now, but then Waddle starts to come on and he starts to play well, and you're like, you know what, let me trade him. He's got less time available than Lemon. I'm glad I did this, and now I'm going to be able to get a running back who I know is playing well, as opposed to, will he be good?
Sure. Love it.
Okay. So, all right. Next one. All right. Steven, he wants to know, how many blue chip prospects are you seeing at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end this year, compared to examples of blue chip prospects like Caleb and May in the QB class, or the Neighbors Harrison wide receiver class, or the Bijan Gibbs running back class?
Awesome. It's tough because really blue players are really rare players. So I think the only prospect that I can look at and be like, this is someone you don't see every few years really is just Jeremiah Love. I think receiver, there's so many different flavors where it's like, yeah, is Cardell Tate really good? Is Mekhi Lemon really good? Yeah, but every class from the last like 4 classes, it seems like we get a prospect of that territory, really. We thought Marvin Harrison Jr. was a blue player. Most people did. Not you, Matt. But most people did in a sense in terms of being a prospect. So it's just kind of tough to see how these guys fit in the NFL. But with running backs, it's Jeremiah Love's kind of in that Bijan, Genty, Gibbs tier.
Yeah.
In terms of just talent ceiling, right? I think he can be upwards of a Jamal Charles type player. At tight end, I don't really see a guy that's of that caliber. Quarterback, Mendoza's good, but not a blue chip prospect like Caleb Williams was. And so that's kind of how I see that one. I know Steven had 2 more, and I can rattle those off too to make it easy. He asked, is this a class with actual hidden stars, like a sneaky great running back or 2 with after Love, or is it more of a beauty in the eye of the beholder draft where there are prospects with certain skill sets, and if they get into the right system, they could blow up and a la James Cook? That's a great question. I would say it depends, but I would probably say it's more of a beauty in the eye of the beholder, in a sense of there aren't a lot of guys that will succeed despite situation. There are guys, though, who can take advantage of a situation. And that's really important when you look at depth charts and really being actionable at looking at, hey, how do these stack up after the NFL draft happened? Because during the NFL draft as well, you're going to get a good sense of where some of these veteran guys are going. Like Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, like guys that have played in the league for a while but don't have spots yet. And those guys soak up target share. That's like an 18% plus target share guys easily. So looking at that, that's important. And then you'll have guys that, go into a running back room that's pretty thin from a secondary or tertiary level that can be pushed up, right? We see it every year. Last year, Kyle Monunga, huge one with Chicago Bears. And then we saw Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt still like 750 yards, like almost 900 total yards, I think, as a 7th round rookie. So you're going to get guys that can take advantage of situation. It's just looking at the situation from the lens of who's ahead of them, what does that talent caliber look like ahead of, and how do we project that player to kind of fit in that room, that system, that run scheme, and kind of going from there. And Steven's last question was, in a wide receiver class with some physical height, weight, size, speed freaks, potentially an X, are any of Lance Caldwell, Brazil, Boston, etc. actual players or just physical specimens? I think Boston is one of those boring prospects that is going to be in the league for a while.
I agree.
I don't think he is necessarily a super high-end X or even like a T. Higgins, like a high-end secondary player. But I do think he can be like a Cortland Sutton now, right? Cortland Sutton prior ACL was a really freaking good player. Cortland Sutton post ACL was a good player, right? And I think that's kind of that same vein of Boston. We get to Brazil. It's tough because he's a really rangy prospect in terms of outcomes, right? I could see him being potentially Christian Watson of an offense where he grows into playing a larger role, like we saw Watson post ACL do this year at the Packers. Or I could see him being a Robbie Anderson type player where you have a role in the league for a good while. You're good at that role, but you're not a cornerstone type player or, a high target share guy. The other guys you asked about were Caldwell and Lance. I like Lance more than Caldwell. I think Lance has the actual ability to play on 3 levels. I watched his tape from last year, And I remember writing down like this kid can actually play. He's a day two player. Um, and then this year he took even a step up, I think, as well. And I think he's definitely a day two pick. In terms of talent, Caldwell's a little bit harder to project because he has physical tools, but I don't think he's at the level from a technical standpoint as Lance is. Lance is just really smooth and does things well, kind of in all phases. Not like as put together as like a Jordan Tyson, let's say, but I think he's a safe player to have a role in an NFL scheme.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lance has two tracks he could go. If he really just works at his craft, maybe we could be talking about an AJ Green type of player in terms of if he really gets good at routes and gets rid of some of the misadventures with his hands. But if he's just going to be a better version of what we see right now, but doesn't change aspects of his game that he could, I think he's kind of an aspiring George Pickens, which still isn't bad. Caldwell, I wouldn't put Caldwell anywhere near any of those guys. I like what you mentioned about Boston. Like, I actually have Nico Collins as the height of his aspirational comparison stylistically. In the middle of that is T. Higgins, and I have him just under T. Higgins. Between Corey Davis and T. Higgins, and Corey Davis is kind of a bargain basement Cortland Sutton type of player.
He was a high draft pick. People forget that, man. Yeah. Corey Davis was a high draft pick.
Yes. So, and then, I would probably put, Brazil. I joke because I had a lot of comparisons with George Pickens as the aspirational profile or the mid-range profile, and I joke that Chris Brazil is the winner of the George Pickens lookalike contest for the NFL draft class this year. I think he's more than a sideline rebounder, but I can see how teams cast him on that rebound, slants, over routes. There you go, and then he gets kind of stuck there if he doesn't
pigeonholed. Yep.
Yeah, he gets pigeonholed if he doesn't start off fast. I think Chris Bell is a dangerous player that I'll mention as part of one of those, in the sense that he's the player in this draft that I would say I'm afraid to consider, and I'm equally afraid to not consider. And
100%.
Yeah, because when you watch his game, he either looks like an ascending talent destined for stardom or an inconsistent, frustrating tease. And I honestly can't really tell which one it is sometimes. But if I had to pick, it would probably be a bit of both, where you're like, oh, he's like Devontae Parker, like you would go, sure. Devontae Parker, who was also Louisville, when asked at Louisville, so what do you credit to your game development? It's just God-given ability. And I was like, whoa, because he figured out that God gave him the ability to do some work and actually have a disciplined approach to his game around year 3, year 4 of being with Miami. And by that point, expectations had dropped with him, and it was a little too late for his game to really be what it could have been. And, that happens. That's just part of the process there. So, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of guys in this class like that who are fascinating, and I like Lance, but and I think teams are going to probably go for him early. I would add Skylar Bell to the mix, even though he's not a big, tall guy.
Sure.
I'm really liking him, but the thing I would say with him is you have to ask yourself the question, because he's a serial clap attacker. Is he basically the exception to the rule, like Golden Tate, Marvin Harrison Sr., and Terry McLaurin, who they catch the ball as ugly as sin technique-wise, but they get it done? Or is he going to have to fix that and be like Quentin Johnston last year, who curtailed some of that stuff and started to be better? We're going to find out. I'm actually betting that he's the exception, and I've got some reasons I'll be talking about in the RSP as to why he's the exception. But it's a gamble. I'll just put it that way.
It is a huge gamble. And before we get to the next question, I mean, I love that you put him in there. Right now, I got asked a couple times today. I put out a tweet and I added him in there. Like, where's he at? Like, I graded him today against the bulk of this receiver class. I've been wide receiver 4. Like I have him pretty high.
I have him 5.
Yep. And I have him pretty high,
Yeah.
and he does a lot well. And you're absolutely right. If he can curtail some of the hand placement, a lot of it happens, in my opinion, in contested situations with him, where he's not in the right spot
Yes.
from a length perspective in terms of where he needs to be with his hands getting in through the defender. That's a huge one. He loses a lot of like 50-50 situations, so to speak, because of that. It's not because he's getting, out strength, like, he's not getting pushed around, but he's just out positioning himself. And if he cleans that up, I think he's a long-term starter in this league.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love it.
Yeah, I'm definitely there with you on that one. All right, so let's move on. We actually got 3 or 4 questions already, and we're only 20 minutes
Oh,
in.
let's go.
I know what
Pat on
is
the
going
back.
on. Whether it was due to injury, bad situation, or something else, Joel wants to know about a veteran receiver and a veteran running back that could be a great buy low in Dynasty fantasy football.
All right, you give me the receiver, I'll give you a running back.
Okay, that's a good thought. Okay, so let me look at this again as I buy time. One veteran who, whether it was due to injury, bad situation, or something else, who would be a great buy low in Dynasty. Well, there's a few here that I think that we can put in, and some of them are going to be predictable. Some of them may not. I'll try and just kind of throw it up against the wall. I still think Jalen Coker is probably a guy that we've got to consider on that end of it. That you can go there. I think he's fairly well known, but I still think that's one in the book. I still believe in Kayshon Boutte. I know that they're probably looking for more help in that regard, but I think that Douglas's days are gone. And if they're smart, they look back at his college tape or they talk to him and say, maybe we put you as a big slot because he should be a big slot. He should not be a split end. And if they put him as a big slot, or mix him flanker big slot with Diggs gone, that's one. Look for Kyle Williams just to see if he can actually hold on to a ball. I think that's another example of a guy that
everything but the catch point.
Yeah, and then the one that I'm gonna guess which one you're gonna say, and then you can give the reason. I'm gonna say Malik Washington.
Okay, I love it. I love Malik Washington. So
yeah, just because who else are they gonna throw to? If they don't draft, and they're going to draft somebody, but he's got to be a big part of this somewhere.
It has to be. I loved all the receivers. I think with Kayshon Boutte, I think the big thing is, I think he's part of that AJ Brown deal. Like I think that's a huge part of this as well. Is AJ Brown for months has been. I mean, not like for probably back to October has been linked to the Patriots, right? As we kind of saw the Vrabel train start to gain some steam and them becoming more contenders, I think AJ Brown in June, since the June 1st cap hit situation is a lot more friendly for Howie and company. I think that does happen. And if it does happen, I think Boutte is a part of that deal. I do think they want to get Kyle Williams some more snaps. I think that's important for them. They also obviously signed Romeo Doubs. Yep. So if you have a trio of Williams, Doubs, AJ Brown, that's not bad at all.
No.
And that allows Kyle Williams to grow into a larger role once Brown ages out of significant target share.
Too.
100%. Yeah.
He's going to need having those veterans are going to be vital for him to grow.
Yep. And then Boutte going to a place where it's just Hollywood Brown, Devontae Smith, and him, Dallas Goedert. I love that. The running back, I would say, I think the biggest one is going to be Kenneth Gainwell. And reason being is I think there are things that aren't being talked about with Bucky Irving, with his recovery and lack thereof. Because he got, and this is the thing, this is I talked about and wrote about this in college. He plays so hard, a million miles an hour. There's no off switch, and there's nothing in between. So he's on the field a lot, but also too, you'll see him leave the field, little nicks and bruises here and there, and it caught up to him this past year with the way he plays and how he takes contact, how he approaches contact. I think that's important to note. And I think there's more than meets the eye to his injury situation and recovery. So Kenneth Gainwell, I think, is someone that we saw in Pittsburgh. He was the best back in that backfield, in my opinion, by a good margin. I think he gets potential lion's share of those touches. And I think that's a really big deal because they're going to need a decent chunk of that offense to come alive. You have no Mike Evans, who I think is that's a bigger gap than people are. People are like, okay, Emeka Egbuka can get more touches here, and Godwin, he's never going to be the same
This
player.
isn't a DK Metcalf
No.
getting replaced by Juju Smith.
Correct.
This is by Jackson Smith and
no, for sure. Yeah. This is a high-end outside receiver, one of the dinosaurs on the perimeter that don't really exist anymore. Yeah. You're not replacing him, but Kenneth Gainwell is going to have, I think, a pretty significant target share and be a big help for Baker underneath. And I think he's my biggest, if I'm going to circle the biggest buy now player at running back in terms of price, it's Kenneth Gainwell.
Nice. All right. So, all right. In Superflex, what is the move at 1.02? Is it Mendoza, or would a top 3 wide receiver be justified there? Also, both of your opinions on Surratt for fantasy purposes. Please and thank you, from Canubis.
Okay, cool. I'll take it, and then we can both talk about Surratt for a little.
All right.
At 102 in Superflex, you can't go wrong with the safe quarterback. But if you're like, I have a couple quarterbacks, on my roster that are good, honestly, I'm looking at a Tate, Tate or Lemon. That's really it. I'm going with one of those two guys. Whoever I like more. I think I have Lemon a smidge higher than Tate. I think it's a little bit safer, but even so, I think Tate is still just as good of a player, if not better. So you can't really, you can split hairs, but you can't really go wrong with either guy. So for me, I'm taking one of those two receivers at 102, or I'm trading back from 102 to 104, knowing I can get either one of those receivers or Mendoza. So I think if you want to acquire some capital on the back end there, have someone who comes up and really wants Mendoza, then you're going to land either a Tate or Lemon at 104, and you're a happy camper.
So what are your thoughts on Surratt?
I think it's one of those where I don't think his brand of football allows for him to be a significant contributor in today's game. I don't think he has enough in his bag as an outside receiver to produce 800 plus yards pretty consistently. I don't think he's quick enough to beat really good interior corners inside. So I think it kind of, leaves you with a Josh Palmer type of player.
That's exactly my comparison.
Oh, that's hilarious. You said that. I had no idea, by the way.
He is on the dot. That's who I compared him to.
We are mind melded from so many episodes, so this is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really it. It's like he's not going to be a high end contributor. Will he contribute in real life? Sure. He's Mac Hollins, for crying out loud, is a starting X receiver in the friggin' NFL. Right. That's kind of the track, like that type of Hollins, that type of Palmer player. But I don't think he's a high-end contributor whatsoever. But I do think he's a good enough player to stick around the league for a while.
I have three players who have the same score for depth of talent in the RSP, but they are wildly different in how I would consider them in context. One of them, I would say, it has a high floor and a medium, probably a high ceiling, not elite, but a high ceiling. One of them has an elite ceiling and a freaking dungeon for a floor.
Dungeon floor is
Yeah,
great.
with spikes in it. And then the other one is Elijah Surratt, who I think is a medium floor, medium upside player. And in those terms, that's Josh Palmer. If he exceeds that, maybe he's Michael Wilson. What Brian Edwards. I thought Brian Edwards might possibly could become,
God.
but
that one
never
hurts
did.
my heart. I'll be honest.
Yeah, me too. So, but I don't see that happening from that perspective. So, okay, moving forward. Jamie wants to know, I'm a Raiders fan. How should I feel about Mendoza Kubiak? I'll start. Listen, I think from a physical ability standpoint, Mendoza doesn't offer you the same blue chip value that Caleb Williams does, or maybe even Drake May. But I think Mendoza actually is a better version of Drake May without quite the arm. It's just that I love how he reads the field. I love how he makes decisions. I love what he does in and outside the pocket. He's faster than you think. We talked about him in that realm before. And with Kubiak, I mean, you give him play action to set things up in time. I think that he's going to be a very smart player who doesn't make a lot of mistakes once he really gets his act together. And I have as high a grade for him as I've given just about any as a lot of quarterbacks in the past 4 or 5 years. Like I think now, is this a good situation for him? I'd like to think they're going to turn a page here, but you got to see what happens with that line. They've done some things that that seem to be pretty good, but the problem is one of the things they did that seemed good. The Max Crosby trade got rid of it. So, it's kind of bad luck there. So it's not going to be an easy year from that perspective for Mendoza, but I think you should be optimistic. And I know that's hard for Raiders fans, Browns fans, Jets fans, or Cardinals fans to ever feel.
Sure.
But I would be optimistic about Mendoza. I think he's a good starting quarterback who could survive a shit show just in the same way that Caleb Williams survived the shit show. And that's kind of what I projected for Williams, is that he was going to have to go through a shit show, but he'd be the only one that could handle it. And he has. It was a war, but he was able to handle it. And I think Mendoza is in that tier.
No, I agree. My quick thoughts is I think he's a very similar player to Dak Prescott, man. I think that's really where I look at him, and the process coupling, the ability to understand what he's seeing. And that's where we talk about the Drake May stuff, right? And we talk about Drake May's next step. It's nothing physical whatsoever. Like, and we've talked about this before. It's the between the ears. Can you process at the level that the elites are processing the game? And that's the biggest thing. And I think Mendoza is honestly closer than Drake May in that respect.
Oh yeah.
And I think he's essentially a Dak Prescott type of player from a physical toughness standpoint, also from a no, please don't run into defenders that way standpoint. Early in Dak Prescott's career, that got him into quite a bit of trouble. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Mendoza and think he's as safe as any offensive prospect in this class for sure.
All right. Well, Peter wants to know, is there any hope for leagues that have 3 and 4 round deep rookie drafts, apart from the wide receivers and a few tight end quarterback dart throws? The talent feels slim even in the second round. Any sleepers at all? And I'm going to say, hell yeah. There's a lot more. This is not that bad of a draft. It's this wide receiver class, to me, is essentially the same as last year's wide receiver class. Not as good as the 2 years prior, but there are still, like, when you look at it from a broader perspective, I had 38 players that I thought had a chance to contribute to a team as either, off the bench reserves to starters. I have 38 this year. And while it's not as strong at the top in terms of safety of where they are, there's a ton of guys at the top of my third tier who will go in like the third and fourth rounds and the fifth rounds who could easily become good starters, and they're not that far away. They just it's just whether they commit to doing the job. We talked about Brazel. We talked about Omar Cooper. We talked about Chris Bell. We've talked about, Denzel Boston. There's still guys like Antonio Williams, who's at Clemson, who could, if he can be a flanker, he might, and develop in that realm, he could be a Jaden Reed, Ladd McConkey type of player in terms of some of the things that he could do upside-wise. There's Josh Cameron, who's built like A.J. Brown, who is he aspires to be the next Larry Fitzgerald. He's got a lot of tools. It's just about whether he can put it all together. We've got guys that, Bryce Lance, we talk about. Ted Hurst is another one like that. These are all guys that are going to be Deion Burks, who if he can play a little flanker, maybe that's the case. Jacoby Lane, if he gets it all together a little bit more, is an interesting guy because of the way he catches. How about Eric McAllister? People just write off TCU because it's TCU, or Tennessee, they write them off too. But Eric McAllister has some really interesting skills to his game. And then there's J. Michael Sturdivant, who, at Cal, you look at him and go, oh, this guy can play. He's kind of a Mike Wilson, Braylon Edwards kind of guy in training. And then you watched him at UCLA in Florida, and they treated him like he was on, he was on a remedial program for wide receivers, in their offenses. And you're going, it's been a while since I've watched a player and go, I liked his tape 2 years before than I did like the past two, and it had nothing to do with him. And that's just the wide receivers. At tight end, if the script flips and we're seeing now oversized fullbacks become the vogue and the value for two tight end sets instead of 11 personnel and having oversized wide receivers, suddenly now you're looking at guys who could really be interesting in those roles. I mean, Carson Ryan, Sam Roush, or you look at those guys, that could be interesting. If not, then you've got guys like, Justin Jolly maybe, or you got the Stowers and Trigg and Sadiq, of course, but you also have Oscar Delp, who's, at Georgia. A lot of people are like,
he pops at Georgia.
Yeah, and what's funny is he's kind of hidden in the scheme of things because, well, there was some Brock Bowers guy there when Delp came aboard, and then they brought in a transfer in Urasek, and they had all this quarterback upheaval with different quarterbacks every year or even in the middle of the season. So, Delp to me could be a Zach Ertz type of player, and and so there's guys like that. And then when we look at running back, I mean, that's all they are at this stage, is a lot of them. Like, I mean, I'll mention somebody nobody's talking about. I'm probably going to finalize his grade after this, but nobody's talking about Miles Montgomery of UCF and Cincinnati. And I've looked at his game, and he might be in a puncher's chance to be a sleeper on my board that I'm going to be looking forward to. There's a guy named TJ Harden out of SMU who's 6'2", 220, didn't get invited to the combine, but he catches his butt off, and he has a little bit of an Arian Foster-esque sort of vibe in terms of how he runs. Very powerful and seems fast enough. Maybe, in practice, I laugh. This is media. This is how media, I bet this is AI, and I would laugh about this because AI probably wrote an article about TJ Harden. He was the fastest. He showed off his speed. his fastest, he was timed as the fastest guy in practice of the running backs at 17 miles per hour.
I'll tell you what, if your fast running back is 17 miles an hour, who the hell are you recruiting?
Exactly. But like the fact that the fact that he
funny.
was playing at the East West Shrine and that
Sure.
that AI wrote that
That's funny.
is hilarious. But I've seen him run faster than that. Okay, or at least I've seen things that tracked that said faster than that. And he's no massive speedster, but I mean, and then Robert Henry we've talked about.
Sure.
There are a lot of guys here. The problem is that people define sleepers as guys that we know are going to be good, but somehow the main media people
Yeah.
just aren't touting them as much, and they want
Sure.
the easy sleeper. But the real sleepers are always the guys that, like a Manon guy, that are deep, and certain things have to happen. But this is not a bad class. It's just not. The expectation is flipped. Most fantasy people are like, I need to feel like there's 20 guys that could be really good, and when I come away in my draft, I got 4 rounds of players that I know are going to be good, and then at the end of the year, they're like, well, maybe next year they're going to really be good. One of those guys hit, but I'm optimistic because the rate my team draft, the draft mechanisms all said good things about them, as opposed to like this thing where you look at it and go, yeah, you've got to just listen to like the fact that this is about situation, and then these guys are on the other end. It's like the same side of the coin. It's like the same coin, but it's approached from the opposite way. This year, it seems everyone's like, oh, this isn't a good class, so therefore, is there anybody good that you're going to help me out with? As opposed to last year, people can look and go, oh, this is a good class, but who's the one that I really want out of this particular thing? It's different side, same coin. That's all.
No, yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, my stance is pretty much the same. I think the big thing is, when you look at it, you got to look at, all right, are there guys that, you graded highly or someone you trust graded highly that are pushed down? Like for me last year, big ones were Cam Scatteroo, Harold Fanning Jr. Like those are the 2 big ones, right? Yeah. Where it's like, yeah, these guys didn't go super high in the NFL draft, but like we know and can prove that they can play at a high enough level to where they deserve potential long-term roles. Now, Cam Scatteroo is a really interesting one because he might be in a situation, and especially if you're not a super high draft capital guy and you go to a team that's poor in terms of management and coaching.
And they switch the regime.
Boom. Regime switches. Cam Scatteroo was graded out to be one of the better running backs in the NFL, like top 10 before the injury last year. Now, let's say they bring in Jeremiah Love. That's all out the window.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is with sleepers, it's awesome to nail them. It's really hard to nail them for multiple years in a row.
Yep.
Because you're talking about guys who are drafted in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, sometimes even UDFAs. It's really hard to hold jobs there. So what ends up happening is you bring in new regimes, they want to bet on a certain position, so they'll just put capital into it, right? That's just how it works. Your best bets at production are always going to be your guys drafted in the 1st and 2nd round. The higher up you go, the better probability they hit. Yeah. So that's where it's tough to figure out guys like Puka Nacua, Stephon Diggs, who end up being long-term superstar players, nearly impossible. So when you look at the 3rd and 4th and 5th rounds of your rookie drafts, if you have them, my best advice is to always look at the depth charts. Look and analyze what we're seeing in terms of projected role. How high end are those starters? You look at Kyle Monangai, you look at that depth chart last year at the Chicago Bears, DeAndre Swift coming off a poor year, Roshan Johnson hurt, not that good. Big role vacancy there, right? You look at Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, same exact thing. Brian Robinson Jr. out of town. Austin Eckler. That's your only competition really there for a massive role. I know they had Chris Rodriguez, but you're looking at a guy that, hey, if he's talented enough, young, fresh legs, maybe he shows something. And so that's the big thing in that capacity. But we'll move on to the next one. what is the value and difference between Lemon and Tyson, both short and long term? Um, I'll go on this one, I guess.
Okay.
I'd say the value of Lemon is you get a physical presence for a long period of time. And that's a big deal. You get kind of this aura and energy at the position that is very hard to find. We're not even talking about the physical play, just that piece of having that as a brand of football in your offense is important. I think you get that immediately. Lemon's ability to play aggressive, tactically sound football at all three levels is great. Great after the catch. Does a fantastic job finding soft spots and zones. There's a lot he does well and is deserving of a mid to high first round grade from about every NFL team. The difference, I think, is going to be, Tyson, I think, will either be a superstar or be out of league in 4 to 5 years. And that's just kind of the injury thing too, right? I mean, if you want to reach your developmental ceiling in the NFL, you have to be healthy enough to do so and develop through, different technical things, different parts of your route tree you're refining. So with Tyson, I think he's an aspiring Allen Robinson type player, which is a very good player. But I think we saw with Allen Robinson as well, like the injuries took a toll physically on him. Right? The ACL took a toll. So he was never the type of player he could have been. Now with Tyson, ACL plus was when he was like 20 years old, 19. So he's a little bit removed from that already, which is great. But we're already seeing these injuries pop up still. Collarbone, non-related. We get into a hamstring injury this past year, grade 2, that's taken 12 plus weeks to heal. That's a red flag when we talk about the recovery side of it. Like that's an injury that should take 6 to 8 weeks, maybe, to be fully healed and ready to go. And with Tyson, that's what you're a little bit scared of and apprehensive. Like if I'm an NFL team, I'm valuing that pretty heavy because if I'm betting a 15 pick on a player, I want to know he's going to be with me for at least 2 contracts. And that's what I don't know with Tyson is he going to be able to be healthy enough to give me that? I know with Lemon, how he plays the game, his demeanor, his physicality, he took harder hits than any receiver in the cycle, got back up, same motor all 4 quarters. I know that's going to be there. With Tyson, I don't. And that's a little bit scary when you talk about projecting that much capital.
I agree completely. All right, so Michael Suter wants to know if you have late first, early seconds in Dynasty rookie draft, are you trading for vets and or 2027 picks? I've heard second round this year is like third round some other years. I would say I think it's more like late firsts are more like mid seconds this year, but then it plateaus in the second and third round that it's the same as last year. It's just like you have more middle tier guys who could pop, but it's that vague middle. So yes, I would be trading if I have a team that I feel like I'm 1 or 2 players away and I can get good veterans who can be that, then yeah, I'm going to trade for that. If I feel like that I can trade for 2028 picks and get more 2028 picks than 2027 picks and get earlier picks as a result of that, I would even look into that in some of your leagues if you can trade 2 years out and consider that if you can't get the 2027 that you want. If you wanted a 2027 first, but now you can like maybe get 2 firsts or get a first and a second in 2028 instead of instead of 1 first. I would consider that as well, especially if you're just rebuilding. If you're rebuilding, you can do that because, again, the 2028 picks give you some flexibility around this time next year where you could probably trade into the 2027 draft with those early picks and have more firepower. So you're still probably going to get into 2027 through 2028. People just aren't thinking about it that way because they're thinking about now as opposed to what a year from now is going to be. All right.
Agreed.
So, all right, white stripes. what what might we expect to see from Cam Ward in year 2 with the new coaches in Tennessee? Thank you.
I think the biggest thing you'll see is just progress, right? I think kind of a disaster under Callahan in year one. I think you'll see progress in a few different areas. I think it's playing in structure. It's important. We don't have the receivers to, to do so. In terms of timing, spacing, just being able to create explosives, it makes things really hard as for a rookie. And you didn't have that, right? Calvin Ridley, I don't know what he was doing most of the year. Was off injured as well. Chigakonkwo was an okay piece, but he's not a great receiver. I thought some of their younger receivers showed some things, but I think you need to get a bona fide wide receiver one in there. That's the first priority. See a lot of people mocking, Love there. I would rather have a guy like Tate, right? Somebody that can really win deep, because that's what Cam Ward. That's a superpower, right? Either extending plays or finding a way to get to the third level with your primary. And that's what he does extremely well and did so at Miami. So I think that's a priority, right? Taking that guy for him, because that's your best friend, right? You need that guy for that archetype of quarterback. So for me, that's the biggest thing I think that will help him take that next step in year 2. And hopefully we can see some playmakers come Tennessee's way in the draft this year.
All right, so I'm gonna do one real quick and one then we'll talk about after that. So Hayward wants to know, I have the 101, 103, and 105 in our rookie draft. If you had to draft from these slots today in a Scottfish PPR league, what would be in a Superflex PPR league, excuse me, probably that's what it is, not Scottfish. What would be your dream to be trio to be had, regardless of team need? I would say at 101, 103, 105. I mean, I think Jeremiah Love's got to be in there. I think one of either one or both of Tate and Lemon, and then if you only could get one of those guys, and then Mendoza. Whatever order you want to go.
That's what I'm saying. Love for sure, and then Tate, Lemon, and then you're hoping to get at 105 one of those two that are left, or you go Mendoza for sure.
All right. So, Hey Jay Bird wants to know if 2027 is truly a quote super class for rookies. Why did they show up in 2026? I love
this is a funny question. I love it. It's a good question too. For me, I think a lot of this is, we're going to see this a lot now, where it's the NIL is a huge factor. Like, it is a absolutely massive factor where you're going to see players going back to school that are kind of puzzling, and you're like, wait, why is so and so returning? And I think it's if you can get a bag, if you're a quarterback, you can go back for $4 million plus. Okay, cool. Sounds good. Because a lot of times, if you're not going to be the first overall pick like Fernando Mendoza, there's not really a guarantee that you're a long-term starter. There's not. So you'd rather improve your stock, take the money, and go, like Dante Moore this year, right? I mean, Dante Moore is projected to be a first-round pick, but there was a lot of oscillating in terms of how early or how late. So would you rather risk, the possibility of you falling to out of the first round, and then you're really not guaranteed a starting job? Or would you rather just bet on yourself for another year, take the millions of dollars and get better at your craft? And, I think quarterback is an experienced position. So if you can experience more, see more, study more, that will help you in the long run. But I don't know if 2027 is a super class. I mean, looking at it now as I get some of the tail end of my evaluations at running back and receiver, I mean, there are some really good players in next class, like really good, obviously, Jeremiah Smith, Tim Coleman, Isaac Brown at running back is someone I really, really like out of Louisville. But I don't know if it's a super class. I think it's going to be pretty similar to where we have 4 or 5 guys that are kind of set it and forget it. Like, these are your cornerstone type players and guys you want in Dynasty, and then the rest, it's like, okay, well, what if X, right? Like Ryan Williams is one of those where he, bananas 17-year-old season, right, at Alabama, but regressed mightily this year. So there are definitely some question marks coming in 2027 that it might not look as pretty as we think right now. So that's kind of my short take on that.
Yeah, I never believe what anybody has to say about a class until they've actually
No,
studied it,
no,
and they
100%.
haven't actually studied it. And if they have studied it, then they don't sleep, because I can tell you, I get 4 or 5 hours a night, and that's not
Sure.
enough. And I
Sure.
know if I'm doing that, I know how I study. They ain't studying. They might have seen the guy flash on
Sure.
TV and go, "Hey, that sounds good,"
Sure.
but yeah, no, don't believe it. So they might end up guessing right. That usually happens.
Right.
All right, so let's see, some quick stuff to just that I can get rid of. All right, Brett Kern wants to know, what do I like about Gunnar Helm? I'm much higher on him than the long term in the consensus. I like the fact that I knew that Chico Conquo wasn't going to be there in Tennessee. So in my projections at the year's end, I basically vaulted him up, because you're taking the chance that he's likely going to be the guy. And they did draft him last year, and he did have some moments last year where they felt pretty good about what he did. He's more of a Hunter Henry type of player,
Yep.
which means that he could be replaceable. He could be paired with somebody else. So, I wouldn't go bananas on it. It's just that probably I have him in the realm of starters in my projections at this point in the winter, before the draft and before free agency. After all that gets settled, he may go back down. Let's see. The other one is Drake May's outlook next year. Any thoughts on his performance to date? Is it him, or is it the scheme? Is his 2025 sustainable? I thought in 2024, Drake May looked like the Drake May that I saw at UNC, which was a physically talented player who, that when pressure started to mount, you could kind of get him to make poor guesses, make bad decisions, not really see the field as fully as he needed to. But if you allowed him to make quick decisions within the scheme of what's going on, and you had a run game with support, he can throw downfield and make some good plays. I thought what happened against Seattle did expose him to being what he actually is, and that Seattle got the book on him, and that's kind of around the time that you're going to see teams get the book on him. So, get better players around him, and if they do that, and he has one more year in an offense like Josh McDaniels' offense, that I think he's going to make next steps, and he can still be statistically very strong. But I think he's still that guy that when they face teams that are really prepared and have the talent to execute a game plan against him, he's not yet that guy against really talented teams that can paint him into a corner and he can throw his way out of it like a Mahomes can, or a top tier quarterback. But I think that he's going to make another step, and he can still be statistically good.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So another one. Forecast Michael Pittman in black and gold. That's from NH Oceanside as well.
I like that one. I'll take it. Yeah, I think the big thing is too, if you have Aaron Rodgers there, right? The one thing you're looking at is consistency at the boundary position, and DK Metcalf doesn't give that to you. Like, I don't know why we keep just putting DK Metcalf on the boundary and saying go win. He can't. Like, he cannot. Like, he's better off at this stage of his career as a big slot receiver, right, who can threaten defenses vertically, because then he makes you guess, right? That's the thing that's difficult. He's a bigger threat in the slot because what are you going to do? He's 6'4", 230 pounds. Like, how are you going to defend him in the slot? Your nickel corner is likely too small. You need safety help over the top. You need to bump a backer over, but he's too quick for the backer. That's tough. But Pittman, what he does is he opens things up, and he's going to be kind of like a James Jones type player in Aaron Rodgers, right? When you saw those two in Green Bay, where back shoulders, the reliable stuff. I think he is going to be the larger target getter because he's the more reliable of the two. I think they might cannibalize each other as well, but it's a better it's an upgrade for the Steelers for sure, because they didn't have a secondary receiver last year, or at least one that was reliable game to game. But if Rodgers is there, I think Pittman Jr. is going to have a really nice year.
All right, cool. So Kyle Whalen, I'll go through a couple quick ones. What are your thoughts on deep reserves like Kanata Mumpfield, Jalen Lane, Isaac Tesla, and Devon Vele. I'll say this. I like Tesla and Mumpfield in that order, probably because Tesla will probably have a Kenny Galladay-esque type of role in Detroit in the way that he'll probably get high-profile scoring opportunities, and with his physical ability, they'll want to get him on the field more and more. Whereas with Mumpfield, I like his technical ability much better than anybody who is on that list. It's not even close. But, again, he's not super fast, and so he's going to have to be a massively good route runner, which he is, but he's going to have to convince Sean McVay that he can be that. They saw some Devontae Adams in him. He's going to have to show that he can make another step forward athletically, maybe to prove that he can be that next step. So I think he's a good wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type. He might be what they hoped Sean Jefferson could give them a few years ago and be a better version of that. But that's where he's at. Lane's got to learn how to catch. And, he's a terrific guy after the catch.
Yeah.
But he's got to learn to catch. And Vele, everybody's going to say he's already too old, but he's a nice Tim Patrick type who can work the middle.
Sure.
And I would say of all those guys, you're going to want to invest in Tesla and hold on to him. If you're in a super deep draft with 45 plus and you have 5 or 6 practice squad spots, Mumpfield comes into play. So does Vele. Though Vele you can add on and off your waiver wire probably at will, and just monitor Lane and see if he proves me wrong, and I hope he does. All right, so then another one from him is love your work, love you guys' work. Love is gone in regular one quarterback dynasty format. Who do you take at 102? Tate or Lemon? We've already talked about that. What's the dependent on landing spot? I think both guys are landing spot independent, except for how they compare to each other, and we'll know that.
Agreed. Yeah, no, I think both of us you'll probably say Tate, and I'll probably say Lemon. I think the difference is going to be, I think Lemon's a little more dummy proof.
Right.
If you get into a system that your quarterback doesn't throw the vertical ball really well and doesn't throw vertical patterns well in general,
true,
and outbreakers at a high level, then you kind of get into trouble. It's like you look at different, but Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence, right?
Yeah.
Just there's sometimes quarterbacks and archetypes of receivers that aren't marriages, and that's one of them. I think Carnell Tate can do anything in the tree. Thomas Jr. can't, but I think Lemon is more dummy proof than Tate is.
Let's see if we can do a few more and then go from there. All right. So 35-year fantasy vet. Will Bashul Tutin be held back from hospital chance in year 2 by Allen and Rodriguez? A lot of attention and varying opinions on this.
Oh, man, this is a good one. I actually think if you look at Chris Rodriguez Jr. and what he did with Liam Cohen at Kentucky, go look at it. Bell cow. Do I think that happens in Jacksonville? Likely not, but I do think that the low red zone work will likely go to Rodriguez, which is frustrating because if you're a Tutin manager, well, what does that leave you? Between the 20s work and not a whole lot of pass catching opportunities. Tutin doesn't profile as a prolific work-a-backer type pass catcher at the position. So that's where it gets murky. You're looking at big plays. You're looking at a Keaton Mitchell plus type role that is going to be undeniably frustrating. So I think Rodriguez is the one to own. The difficult part too of this is looking LaQuint Allen. Great third down back. Like he's basically going to be the Rashad White of Liam Cohen's offense. So where does that really leave Tutin? Between the 20s touches, how many of those will he receive? Between 38 and 42% of work? Likely. Not betting on that for, sustainable production in fantasy.
All right. We'll do one quick one here. I think you're going to agree with me when I say it. Jesse Lipes wants to know, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, Jesse. Jesse wants to know if he gets a decent landing spot, is Drew Aller potentially an undervalued rookie draft steal? No. No. So, and then Paul, I bet you didn't plan on a 3-hour podcast. Who are some rookie sleepers that would get an immediate bump in the right landing spot? And where is that ideal landing spot?
Oh man,
That
that's funny.
let's save this one as a question for next podcast,
Yeah,
because I think that that could be a 20-minute answer.
absolutely.
Um, are the top 4 wide receivers, whoever your fourth is, landing spot proof? Best and worst landing spot. I don't know if we can go best and worst landing
Oof.
spot, but top 4 wide receivers, landing spot proof. I'd say my top 3 of my top 4 are landing spot proof, I think. But if I were going to be conservative, I'd say 2 are No, you know what? You just talked about it. 1 is landing spot proof, and that's Lemon. Tate is you've got to be an idiot to pick him and not have a quarterback who can
I have a
target
plan
him
for that.
and not
Sure.
for
Yeah.
that.
Correct.
Then if depending on who you have at 3 or 4, it could be guys like Concepcion, it could be Tyson, it could be
Sure.
Malachi Fields, it could be
Oh, Malachi Fields.
it could be some guys like
Wow.
that. Yeah, I mean, there's some guys that
For sure.
could be in that range. And so I would say, yeah, there's only one, and that's probably Lemon. But Lemon is, I agree with Brandon. He's landing spot proof for the most part, because most teams you're still going to have some 11 personnel, and not everyone's going to 12 to next year. So you're going to still have that. And he can probably play flanker very well. But yeah, the Tate qualifies as you got to be a fucking idiot if you if you don't have a quarterback.
That's funny. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that definitely, I said it. Lemon's dummy proof. Tate, you gotta be a moron to not use him correctly. And then Tyson too. Like if he stays injury free and develops, yeah, he's gonna be dummy proof too. My 4-5 right now is Bell and Cooper Jr. Cooper Jr. You're gonna have a plan for. He's a DJ Moore, in my opinion, and that means you're gonna get the ball in his hands. Like you don't take him and just send him out there and say go win. No, you're getting the ball in his hands. He's an energy giver. He's the energy bunny of an offense. Like that's a big deal. Bell's interesting because any player that's drafted outside of the top 35 picks, like you might not have an immediate role for. So that's a tough one. So I'd say 1 player, dummy proof. 1 player, you're a moron if you don't use him correctly. Tyson falls into he's going to be really good if he stays healthy. That's the big caveat. Then Cooper Jr., I mean, you have a plan if you freaking draft him.
Yeah. So, okay. So, Jesse, just to follow up on your Aller question, no. But no, actually, to give you a little bit fuller of an answer, Drew Aller is kind of one of those robo quarterbacks that come off the assembly line. They look the way they want a quarterback to look. They throw the way they want a quarterback to look. They're built the way they want a quarterback to look, but they've got a TRS-80 processor inside in terms of how he sees the game at this point, and that's very hard to overcome. So you're not gonna. It's probably going to be a tough one on that end of the spectrum. And the last one is just Jamarian Miller. What do we think of Jam Miller? I'll start and say he was definitely. You looked at his speed from at the 40, and that actually clocks if you watched him from 2024 when he wasn't playing through injury this year. So he definitely has that speed. But can he create the space and accelerate to get to that top tier on that runway? And I would say there's big questions about that at best. He's a determined runner,
It's hard.
but he's got to kind of gather himself a bit to do some things. I'd say he's more of a reserve who can hit the big play when the runway's perfect. That's where I would see him.
No, I agree with that 100%. I think it's tough to project the running back because I just don't know how many are going to be drafted in the first and second day.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's, the 2 Notre Dame guys on day 1 and 2. And then after that, Mike Washington Jr., I think Emmett Johnson's one that's really interesting because we're not talking about him a lot because his didn't test well, whatever. But he's kind of in that Bucky Irving vein, which is a Tim Devin Singletary, good player, is not overly athletic, but I mean Singletary is still in the league. I mean, he got drafted in 2019.
I've got a point for this that I think is worth noting for people. I think relative athletic score is a very cool metric. It's a very good conversation starter. It's a layer of information that's good. Sports writers love that shit. It's like catnip for them because it's a layer of information that can be seen as facts that they can add and reference. But let's remember something. Judging players based on each other in history of what their times were for drills relative to each other in history and having a percentile doesn't tell you are they at the minimum acceptable amount for what it is you expect them to do. So it doesn't weigh in. So like for instance, Devin Singletary, you brought him up. Short, small, slow, not a good accelerator. Not strong. He is essentially, he has great vision and decision making and great quickness with good feet, but those are compensatory factors. An easier one that you don't have to go that crazy with was Dalvin Cook. The Spark scores and all the analytics that often go with running backs, they're trying to use the drills that mimic what whoever came up with these drills as they evolved to try and mimic what most running backs do or are supposed to do. Dalvin Cook didn't cut. Dalvin Cook bent. He bended around things, and when he couldn't bend, his feet moved like little pistons like this as he was going, and he could still manage to play. His vertical sucked for a starter. His 3-cone drill, I think, sucked for a starter. His and people were like, "Oh my God, he was so productive at Florida State, and that was a good program, and maybe he's a big bust, and we don't even know it analytically." But this is where you have to look and go, with RAS score, does the player play a style that fits what he's being judged on? Or is he not? And he did not. And so you have to look at RAS score and say, and also what's the minimum? So because again, if the minimum score for an Emmett Johnson for 4.59, if he's running a 4.55 or what he was running at the 40, something like that, was it 4.55? I think was the score. What if, for me at least, what I've figured over the years is that the minimum standard for me for an average size running back is 4.59. That's the minimum for me to say, yeah, you've got starter worth or 40. You're not elite,
sure.
But you can start and for a team like that, and then there's other factors too, because you can look at Malachi Fields. He runs a 4.61, but he weighs 218. He's 6'4". And also, he's got feet that are closer to what a running back has in terms of the 3-cone, and his acceleration on a 20 is also pretty darn good too. You start looking at all those things together and go, what is a 4.6 what is a 4.61 for a 6'4", 218-pound guy relative to I don't know, a 5'11", 178-pound guy?
Sure. 100%. I think that's the big thing too. Is you look at the NFL, and you find so many players that are outliers in terms of the RAS, and not thinking, oh my gosh, this player is a second, third contract player. It happens all the time, right? Dave Montgomery's on his third contract here. He's getting paid good money. Right. And I remember he was a 4.63 player, 4.64, not fast at all. Devin Singletary we brought up, right? Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua,
Arian
these guys did.
Foster,
Arian
Priest
Foster.
Holmes.
Yes, we can name them till the cows come home. It only matters till it doesn't. Can you play the position at a high enough level for a coach to be comfortable putting you out there? That's all that matters. right? And then that's the thing too, is none of these guys are going to be that below requisite to like be that poor if they're starters or guys who are contributing a decent amount.
Well, listen, I can't now with that topic. I'll just end it this way. First of all, we thank Brandon for coming on as always, and we got through all the questions. At least all the ones I saw, the ones that copied me.
You know what? Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do too. I'll look at the ones if we didn't get through some.
Yeah.
I'll just do a short pod on the clock pods.
Okay.
And I'll just answer them.
Yeah.
If we missed any.
We at least touched on all the questions. We didn't answer all of them, but there were maybe 3 or 4 we didn't really answer.
Sure. Yeah.
So we did pretty darn good in an hour and 15.
We did.
Yeah.
We went way over our projection of 5. So pat in the back for both of us.
That's right. And then the second note, Brandon, is after our last segment that we just answered question about, I cannot wait for the AI overlords to start trying to feed in, trying to start doing scouting. I cannot wait for that. I will be asleep on my couch. You can wake me when it's time, because it's gonna be fun. It's gonna, because AI is nothing but a people pleaser at this point. It's gonna certainly have value. I understand that, even though all the hedge fund managers I know out there and financial people are pushing it because we need you to fund what we're doing so that we can make money off this, and we need you to train it. And it's gonna be the thing, and it will be the thing in a lot of ways. But can't wait for the NFL to be stupid. I don't really want to see this, because I'd like to see scouts keep their jobs, but with the trash process that has been around for 70 years in the NFL, in terms of what they would have to feed into that. Garbage in, garbage out, baby. I cannot wait for what kind of stuff with a dog food topper of analytics on top of it that probably is some version of the misguided 6'2", 200 pounds is the minimum that we're going to look at for a receiver with a BMI of X.
Yeah,
and Spark score of this. I cannot wait. It's going to be Brandon, you quit your day job, dude, because it's going to be
for sure.
People are going to be coming. All right. On that note, enjoy your Microsoft Copilot.
I love it.
All right. We love y'all. Take care. Bye.